What's up, everybody? Welcome to Sunday Night Showdown here on RotoGrinders. I'm Justin Carlucci alongside Keith Eister and producer Devin. And 4 p.m. games are wrapping up. And what do you know? Another chalk smash week, Keith, man. But I heard you had a little bit of a sweat going on in one of your GPPs. So tell us what's going on. What do you got going on?
Yeah, I made the mistake of a fading Cup who was getting like a 40% target share last week. I made sure to not make that mistake again this week. So I did have a team up there at the top of the 3 max. I had an Allen stack without Diggs, so I had Manny Sanders in that one. And then I had the Cup Godwin correlation on that. Came close, got up to third, but couldn't quite bring it home. A Godwin touchdown at the end there would have helped me out quite a bit.
Oh, man, yeah, that game appeared to start out a little sluggish, and everybody was pretty heavy on it. But hey, good build. The late game had a lot of fire. Late games had a lot of firepower again, just like last week. That Seattle game, I had Jefferson, I had Cousins on one of my main GPP builds, and I also had Osborne. So that didn't exactly end well.
Osborne ruined a bunch of my teams too. His salary was very nice to fit in everything that you wanted. So played quite a bit of him. Cheap chalk. Sometimes it doesn't work out.
Sometimes it doesn't work out, but that's what cheap chalk is, man. Lucky for us, we have the Packers traveling to San Fran, and 2 teams that are still kind of a bit of a mystery to an extent, with a lot of moving pieces. And obviously Green Bay opened the season with a lot of rust, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you call it. And then they went to Detroit and took care of business. San Fran was beating the brakes off Detroit opening week, as they should have. And then kind of that anomaly second half where Jared Goff came all the way back almost. And everybody thought, well, maybe that defense just, I don't know, maybe it's not as good in San Fran as everybody made it out to be. Well, they held the Eagles in check pretty nicely in week 2. But I still feel like there's a lot of uncertainty with the gauging how good these 2 teams really are. San Fran's the home favorite here. And there's a lot of personnel changes due to injuries. The Niners backfield has been a complete circus carousel, whatever you want to call it, since opening week. So that's something to monitor here. I guess, Green Bay side is a little more, in terms of personnel, solid. Like, we kind of have a clearer picture of what the Packers are going to roll out there. So what are just your initial kind of macro thoughts about this game tonight, Keith?
Fairly good size total, 50.5. It looks like is the most recent line on that. Like you said, -3 San Francisco, which I don't know which of these teams is better. So I think which side we think is going to lead, I think is going to be an important discussion here. Um, the San Francisco backfield, very important. Like, do they just hand the ball to Trey Sermon now after he was inactive week 1? I mean, they don't really have anybody else left. So kind of think it has to be Sermon. Going to get an underpriced RB1 here for San Francisco. And then on the Green Bay side, it's really important whether they're leading or behind because of what Aaron Jones is. He's super expensive on this slate after his explosion last week. So it's Aaron Jones is really tough. Obviously, you have Adams there too, and to build lineups with both of them, that gets really dicey. So important decision there at the top of the Green Bay skill players.
Yeah, definitely. And all guys with super high upside. And obviously, Trey Sermon is extremely cheap, as you can see on my lineup HQ screen here. So I don't particularly think by any means this game is going to be a shootout. Just from what we've seen so far and looking at some data, I think the Niners are a respectable defense. Obviously, they have some household names on that side of the ball. I think that Lions second half charge in week 1 was more of an anomaly, or, whatever you want to call week 1 pretenders, right? We saw just some crazy stuff in opening week. We thought Jameis Winston was going to, head to the Super Bowl. Some people were calling for him on Twitter. We saw the Titans lay complete egg, and then got the Wheeler side on, by the way, and then come back in Seattle and then take care of business against the Colts today. They look pretty good. I don't know. I'm willing to kind of throw out week 1, right? It was just kind of one of those weeks. I think the Niners are, a top half of the league defense. I don't think this is going to be a walk in the park. And I think Detroit's pretty bad defensively. That Baltimore game, let me know if Hollywood Brown killed any of you guys, but that's
I think we're back here. Sorry about that.
Scores a little I don't know. I think 49ers are about, as good as Vegas has projected them to be. I think they deserve to be a slight favorite here. I think this will be kind of a grind of a game. So I don't know. I mean, if you looked at our, I'm not going to give away the farm here, but one of the perks of RG Premium, I think most of you tuned in are probably RG Premium members, is you get to see the Slate IQ article, and there's some pretty sick leverage points. The 2-4 build, Keith, I'm sure you took a look at it before the show. The 2-4 build, according to the data that was pulled up, is showing some of the highest leverage in terms of lineup construction on DraftKings for a showdown slate that I've probably seen, maybe to date. Was it over 60%, top 0.1% finishes for a 2-4 build? Is that what we were looking at? I think that's pretty extreme, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely extreme. And like you said, like nothing else is even close. The next closest thing is the 3-3 at like 22%. So, I mean, there's one build that I have, where that makes a ton of sense. I think with Rodgers concentrating on Adams so much, if you run Adams in the captain and Rodgers in the flex and run it back with 4 49ers, I think that build makes a lot of sense for the 2-4. With Green Bay winning on the back of like 3 Adams touchdowns. Rodgers obviously gets there with those 3 TDs. And then you have the 49ers guys mixing in with volume. So that's the build that makes a lot of sense to me when considering slate IQ. You could see it on the 49ers side as well with Kittle is the high volume guy. We haven't seen it yet this season, but he's certainly shown those games before. Deebo Samuel's had a large target share here in the first 2 weeks of the season. So he's another guy that I'm very interested in. If I'm kind of building to where the winner sees a lot of concentration to one main guy, and then the losing team has just it kind of spread around to 3 or 4 different guys.
I love our slate IQ breakdowns, and
it is awesome. Yep.
It's awesome. And I can you feel that like a butt's coming? And I feel like, I love the comparisons and the historical data. I don't know, like we just found out pretty much like fairly recently that Sermon is most likely going to be the guy to lead the backfield in touches at his price. So I'm just thinking out loud here. I don't know how many of these prior slates had that kind of, I don't want to use the word anomaly again, but of a situation with news breaking kind of later, right? Kind of like, I don't know if those slates had the $3,000 running back for most likely for sure, whatever you want to call it, going to lead one of the backfields and touches. Right. So I love the idea of going, Roger or one of the wide receiver ones at captain. But there's a part of me that I'm thinking if raw points are really going to matter, I think Trey Sermon might have to enter the conversation of being in that captain slot just with the savings alone on salary. It's not my favorite, but if Vegas thinks the Niners are going to be competitive, I think they're going to be fairly competitive. I don't think they're going to be, and my best guess is they're not going to be trailing by 2+ touchdowns at any point. Who knows? What do I know? But that's what I'm going with. So I think you can make a case for it to be kind of a grinder game. Niners play with a little bit of a lead, at least maybe for half of the game. And I think, Sermon could be definitely serviceable. And then you can start doing some funky things if you think it's going to be like a slop fest and maybe correlate him with the Niners defense or something like that. It's not my favorite, but again, if you're playing large field stuff like whatever the milli is, or I think it's 500K to first, the large field GPPs, like that's some of the stuff where you can get different, where it's not the likeliest of outcomes, but it's certainly an outcome. So I don't know, like talk to me about Sermon, and are you willing to play him at that captain spot in any kind of like game script build?
Yeah, so you make a great point about like data analyzation and the simulation and how it has no idea what the context surrounding Trey Sermon being 4K on this. Like there is no historical data on Trey Sermon except for week 2. So there's no way for like the simulations that are run to know that Trey Sermon is likely going to lead the backfield in touches by a good margin, and he's way underpriced for that role. So I definitely think that's a great point, and that's what we as the people who are building the lineups need to add in and make sure that we're influencing our lineup construction and things like that. I think that Trey Sermon as captain makes a ton of sense. With his price tag, it allows you to fit in some of the higher end skill guys, like to get like an Adams and a Rodgers plus Debo and Garoppolo type of thing. You like Sermon at captain makes that happen for you. So you can just do builds with things with Sermon at captain that you can't otherwise do if you're trying to run out like Adams at captain or Aaron Jones at captain, things like that. So very good point. I think Sermon at captain is definitely in play, and I don't even think it has to be like dependent upon game script. Like you could still have a San Francisco loss where a Sermon captain wins, in my opinion, just because of his price tag. Do you agree with that kind of thought process there? That he lets you do so many other things with the rest of your lineup that even if Sermon isn't the highest scorer on the slate, you can build the optimal lineup with him at captain.
I agree. And I mean, if you want to get crazy, sometimes we like to get crazy, or I guess in our industry, we call it being unique. But I think on FanDuel, and I know we usually talk a lot of DK, but 5,400 on FanDuel, clearly if this news broke when the slate was constructed by, DK and FanDuel, he would be much more expensive. So I think where raw points matter, Trey Sermon is probably by default. Oh, you can just look at the projections and see where he projects in terms of the median projections on the blitz here. But he's far, he's 6th on the pecking order here. I think you can get some sick leverage on Sermon on FanDuel at the MVP or cap, whatever you call it, MVP over there, because obviously the salary savings don't matter. You can leave money on the table over there, and not a lot of people get anxiety when they leave money on the table, even in Showdown, right? A majority of the public just won't do it. So I think that's obviously not the likeliest of outcomes, but it's an outcome. And I think if I'm playing large field on FanDuel, which I'm not, but I thought about it. My money's on DraftKings tonight, but I think that's a very interesting look on FanDuel over there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, in that scenario, you need him to be the raw point scorer, whereas in DraftKings, it's a different game because you can build the lineup just salary based. Saving the money on a 1.5 multiplier definitely helps you out. So totally agree. Different thought processes there. FanDuel, you need him to score the raw points, where DraftKings, you can kind of do other things with the rest of your lineup where there are other routes to get him there in the captain.
All right, so let's just talk some quarterbacks here. We have Rodgers and we have Garoppolo, and what are you seeing out of these guys tonight?
Man, which Aaron Rodgers are we getting? Does he want to be in Green Bay? Is he still this elite guy that we've seen for so many years. You mentioned his performance last week in Detroit was great. How good is the Detroit defense, though? So I think Rodgers is still a very good quarterback. I'm going to build my lineups tonight with that thought in mind. I think he can have some success against the San Francisco defense. I do have respect for the San Francisco defense, but I think Rodgers has a fine day here. I won't be running him at captain just because I generally like to avoid quarterbacks and captain anyway. They're usually one of the highest owned captains, and I think you can get some leverage by fading them in captain. So that's generally a stance that I have on most showdown slates.
Yeah, I'm the same way for tournaments as well. And I think we're going to get some Trey Lance questions. So do you want to get that out of the way now and give me your input?
I mean, if he was super cheap and it took one touchdown to get him there, I'd be all about it. But since DraftKings, it was, I don't know, 2 years ago, I think is when they made the switch to price up all the backup quarterbacks, which kind of changed the game. And yes, we had the one Mariota week where he ended up as an optimal captain as a backup, but that's not going to happen very often. For Trey Lance to pay off a 6K price tag in this game, you probably need 2 touchdowns on him or him to break off a really long run. I don't have any Trey Lance, so it's not something I'm doing. If you want to play for it, thinking that you're going to have a unique construction that way, I get it, but it's really difficult for him to pay off that price tag.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, if you want to throw a dart or two in the large field stuff, if you got a little bankroll to throw around, I'm not going to hold it against you.
Yeah, we've seen one more point on that. There is a scenario where Garoppolo falls on his face in the first quarter and Trey Lance takes over and runs the rest of the 3 quarters. If you want to play for that, go for it. I'm not doing it today. I'd wait for a scenario where he's named the starter to want to play him, but certainly understand that there's way more upside out of this backup quarterback than there normally is.
Totally agree. It's possible. I was just gonna say, it's possible to Garoppolo, and he's looked awful at times. Especially if they're trailing too. I mean, so just thinking out loud, I think Trey Lance fits the best with a Green Bay skill player captain, and you're hoping it's ugly early, right? Like they're getting throttled early, and we need to play catch up. We need a spark kind of thing, right? I mean, I'm thinking you're probably playing one of the head honcho skill position guys at captain from Green Bay if you're going to run it back with Trey Lance.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's move over here to running back. This is, we touched on some of this here. There's a lot of skepticism about Aaron Jones' role and, oh my God, AJ Dillon, et cetera, et cetera. Last week kind of shut the door on that for now, I think. There's no doubt that Dillon has some kind of role in the Green Bay offense. It's just not what a lot of people were hoping for, that we're not Aaron Jones truthers this summer. So would you, how do you feel about Aaron Jones in this one? Is he the raw point scorer at running back? I mean, like scale of 1 to 10, what are the odds that Trey Sermon outscores Aaron Jones in DK scoring? 1 to 10. Give me your thoughts here.
I think Aaron Jones is pretty touchdown dependent, and I think the odds Trey Sermon can outscore him. I mean, you're talking raw points, not point per dollar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Raw points. I mean, I think it's closer than like 60-40. I mean, maybe 60-40 is the right ratio. I think I would say Sermon has about a 40% chance to outscore Jones, but I think it's a lot closer than people think.
That's a pretty good. I'd take those odds. If I'm looking to get different here. That being said, AJ Dillon's still super cheap. In the right game script to see him play, like if you're playing a Green Bay upset and you're not a believer in San Fran, is that where you put AJ Dillon in some of your builds, like up by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter kind of thing?
It is. That's exactly what I'm doing tonight. I'm gonna play like this is last week, and we haven't seen a 4 touchdown explosion from Aaron Jones, and we think that AJ Dillon can still be a part of this offense in a timeshare with Aaron Jones. I know it didn't work last week, and I'm perfectly okay if that's not what we see again. Aaron Jones gets 80% of the work, then my AJ Dillon shares are probably going to be dead. But at this price tag, 2.6K on DK, very much in play for me. I think he can pay that off. I could see him getting some goal line work. I could see him getting some pass game work even. Just on a drive that Jones is resting or something like that. It just doesn't take a lot for Dillon to pay it off.
Yeah, all he needs is a touchdown. I know it sounds like a lot, but all he needs is to get in once, right? I mean, when you put it that way, it doesn't seem like a lot.
That's the easiest way to get there too. Yeah, I mean, but I do think that there's a route for him to get there with volume. Like, I know we haven't seen it, but it's a talented guy that they invested a lot of draft capital in. So I'm still playing that he's going to be involved here.
Weren't you supposed to victory lap somebody on Twitter on our last show? I remember we were talking about it, and I said you have to victory lap it if this guy scores. Who were we? Oh, was it Darrell Williams?
Or Darrell Williams, and he did find the end zone. Yes.
Is AJ Dillon this week's Darrell Williams, or are you not as hot on on the path of AJ Dillon as you were Darrell Williams?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he absolutely can be. I don't know that I have quite as much AJ Dillon as I had Darrell Williams last week, but yeah, he's definitely in play as one of my favorite value options for sure.
This is a hell of a call, by the way. Good stuff. Good stuff.
I also thought the Chiefs were going to run him out of the building, so I kind of sucked out on that with the touchdown, but you know.
Chiefs are going to be an interesting topic of conversation. I mean, it's all we're going to see on major media networks this week, right? What's wrong with the 1 and 2 Chiefs, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, we're thinking of Andy Reid, hoping all is well there. I heard he got taken away. I wasn't by an ambulance, wasn't feeling well. That's just terrible to hear. So hopefully we get an update on Andy Reid soon. Just a great guy for football. And
yeah, for sure.
We'll see what happens. Hopefully it's just good news coming out of Green Bay this week. Anyway, this running back whole, you know, everything you're looking at lineup HQ here. I have Kerryon Johnson up on my screen, and it's week 3, and I didn't think I'd be talking about Kerryon Johnson, but the news was he was elevated from the practice squad. You know, we know all the injuries that the Niners have dealt with. Raheem Mostert broke a lot of hearts in DFS. And then Elijah Mitchell made a lot of people's fab budgets completely broke too in annual leagues. Wow. So who's next? I mean, do you have a grasp on this pecking order? The thing is, everyone is assuming it's Trey Sermon's job to lose. He's probably the most talented runner, even though we haven't seen him in a regular season NFL game, but just from the eye test and the tape and the preseason and the coach's quotes, this is all a big educated assumption that Trey Sermon is gonna. I'm playing devil's advocate here now, right? So this is all a big educated assumption. Who else is going to be in the mix? Is it Kerryon Johnson? Is it Trenton Cannon? Is it Jaquez Patrick? Like, is Kyle Juszczyk going to get 5 carries and just break a showdown slate? I don't know. What's going on here? What do you think?
Yeah, I have no idea either. I just used draft capital as a main point to make a case for AJ Dillon. But here on the Kyle Shanahan run 49ers, we have a Trey Sermon, third round pick, I think, who was inactive week 1, a healthy scratch. We have Brandon Aiyuk, who was a second round pick, running behind Trent Sherfield, a guy they picked up off the scrap heap. So that conversation is different here with Shanahan. I think Sermon's the guy. I'm building lineups like Sermon's the guy. Obviously, he's not going to get 100% of the work. So whoever we think is going to run second, they're all cheap enough. They're in play. Who that is, I don't know. So going to mix a couple of different guys in, assuming that role. I don't think that Trey Sermon even gets like 80% of the touches here at running back. So one of these secondary guys is in play for this showdown slate, especially. I think Trenton Cannon is more of a special teams guy, and he's the most expensive of the other guys. Has Patrick, I don't know. Kerryon Johnson just called up. I don't know. Kerryon Johnson has a super attractive price tag. That's what I know. So that's the guy that I have the most of out of those 3, but I don't feel great about it. There's no conviction there. It's just a price thing that is kind of like running Sermon in the captain. It helps your lineup do things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And there's a path to him getting some touches here. So that's how I'm playing it.
I mean, you broke it down as well as probably anybody rationally could at this point. Let's dive into some pass catchers, and then we'll build, a mock lineup or 2, or most of a lineup or 2, and then we'll take some questions before kickoff. So, obviously you have Devontae Adams up top here, rightfully so, and We know what this guy's ceiling is. Was a first-round pick in most fantasy formats this year. 16 targets, averaging eight a game. There's nothing to balk at there. It's fine. The first game was a fall in the face for everybody in Green Bay, and he still had 10 DraftKings points. So Detroit didn't score. 8 grabs, $120. All is right in the world again. He is probably my preferential captain in optimal builds, I'm thinking. And I think with all of the unknown on the Niners side, I think you could play Adams at large field and large field stuff as well. So I can't fault you there. We have him projected at just under 20% owned as a captain on DK, I believe, according to the Showdown article. And correct me if I'm wrong. And I think that's okay. It's not my favorite, but he is probably the quote unquote right play in terms of talking about these 2-4 builds, and the number one pass catcher is Davante Adams. Talk to me about Adams, and then after that, is kind of a little murky.
Yep, 18% is the projection we have for his captain ownership, highest on the slate, which is correct in my opinion. For optimal builds, I think Adams makes, like your 3 max and stuff like that, it makes a ton of sense for Adams. Just a guy we've seen with a 30% target share for many years. Rodgers' preferred target, 9 targets last week, 7 in week 1. Hasn't been in the end zone yet. This is one of the premier touchdown scorers at the receiver position that there is in the NFL. So if you don't get the Aaron Jones touchdown variant where he gets almost every single touchdown in the game, I think Adams is the guy that kind of filters to. So I have a ton of Davante Adams, an awesome play on the slate. Completely agree. The ownership doesn't scare me off because I think that he is the optimal captain as much as anyone else on the slate. So I have a good amount.
After that, you have a couple of Niners guys projected right behind him. Debo, big target share so far, taking advantage of it. Has been the alpha in that offense in terms of pass catchers. Whenever Green Bay is on a slate, everyone says, well, Jerry Alexander is going to lock XYZ receiver up. Are you taking any stock into Jerry Alexander? Are you like, how much stock are you putting into individual where people are lining up in the slot on the outside with, like, is that playing a factor for you in any of these Niners receivers?
It isn't. And it's just because we don't know the answer. Like you heard so many narratives about, Jalen Ramsey's going to shadow Mike Evans. Jalen Ramsey's going to go into the slot against Chris Godwin because he's been playing more in the slot this year. And I mean, I don't know that either one of those really mattered in the game. Like I saw several times where Ramsey was on Evans and several times where he was on Godwin. So we don't know what's going to happen. I'm not going to play this scared of Jair Alexander. Obviously he's a factor. He's a great corner. But it's not taking me off of Debo at all. I think Debo is an awesome play. And I'm going to have plenty of him. The reason I'm not well over the field on Davante Adams is because of Debo Samuel. If the 49ers are the ones scoring the points, I think Debo can outscore Adams. So it makes a lot of sense. Going to be a nice leverage play if that happens. So I have slightly more Debo than Davante, but I love both of them.
Yeah, I kind of like some of this unknown or uncertainty on this 49ers side. Like Aiyuk played 6 or 7% more of snaps in week 2, and obviously there's a pretty much a bare cupboard in this game log here. But who are we to say is not going to play 80%, to 90% of the snaps tonight? We don't really know what happened. Was he in the doghouse? Was he really like rehabbing a hamstring issue that apparently it doesn't make any sense because he practiced in full the previous 2 weeks, according to reports,
and played special teams.
He played special teams. So if he plays 20-25%, if more of the snaps, week 3 here, like Packers at home would be a monumental win for the Niners. Not taking anything away from Detroit or Philly, 2 great wins on the road, but to get this win at home against Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, like, you need your best players on the damn field, especially when you're, scraping the bottom of the barrel here at your running back position. Again, we know Trey Sermon is super talented, no knock at him, but if Mostert was healthy and Hasty was healthy and Mitchell, like there had to be some issue with Sermon that he was buried. So we might not even be talking about Trey Sermon if those three guys didn't get hurt. So I think there's a chance, for tournaments, that Aiyuk is. Who am I? Who's to say he's not going to be the number one pass catcher on San Fran? We don't know. They're a low volume passing team, and we know that, which is super scary. But he's kind of, I don't want to say a Robert Woods-esque, like more of a gadget guy, but we've seen him on end arounds and some Shanahan specials and all this kind of stuff here. So again, I don't feel great about it, but you don't win money when you look at things after the fact. And you're like, wow, like should have had more interest in Aiyuk. He played 70% of the snaps. Who knows? So I have some Aiyuk captain lineups tonight, and who knows? Tonight could be the night. Do you have any take on that? Am I crazy, Keith? Here? Am I crazy?
I don't think you're crazy at all. I think your point about him being a gadget guy is a phenomenal one. We just got done talking about a San Francisco backfield that is short on talent and short, bodies that have just been called up from the practice squad. I could absolutely see them incorporating a screen game to Aiyuk as part of like an extension of their running game. We saw the Steelers do that last year when they, with Deontay Johnson a lot, when they were without running backs last year. The 49ers are kind of in that same situation. So again, you made a great preface that we have no idea what the issue is with Aiyuk and why he hasn't been on the field. We both agree that there's zero doubt that he's one of the two most talented receivers on this team, but we can't explain why he hasn't seen the field hardly in the first 2 weeks. So we have no idea if he is still in that situation or if he's going to go out there and get a full allotment of snaps. You're never going to get him at this low of a price again if he does go back to that full role. And the ownership should come in. I would guess projecting ownership for this is a nightmare because you don't know what people are going to be feeling, and it's a complete shot in the dark. But I think the ownership comes in fairly low on him, and the price tag is great if he's going to be out there. So definitely don't think you're crazy for wanting to take some shots there.
All right. Appreciate it. Appreciate that vote of confidence. So just real quick, and then we'll hop into a couple of builds, and then we'll take some questions in about 10 minutes or so before lock. We kind of know the story with these Green Bay receivers. Everybody always speaks so highly of Allen Lazard, and the physical tools are there. Just hasn't really translated consistently. I just feel like someone on the opposite side of Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback should be eating, and that just hasn't been the case. So Lazard's one of those guys who I feel like he's a showdown guy every now and then, just by coincidence, and 5%. Geez, it's super cheap. Although I don't have a ton of him. Valdes-Scantling, a guy who consistently rips my heart out of my chest. We know what he's about. Super boomer bust. Nothing on the stat sheet last week, but he did have 4 targets. And I don't have his numbers in front of me, but his ADOT, I believe, is still 24 or 28 through 12 targets now. It's not just 1 or 2 passes. So there's a case for a couple of guys here. And if you had a couple of glasses of whiskey or something and you think Valdes-Scantling catches the bomb, then you're in great shape and you're able to save a lot of salary and kind of not jam in, but get some of those higher floor guys in the rest of your build. So talk to me about some of these other guys: Valdes-Scantling, Lazard. What are Trent Sheffield's role and Jawan Jennings, who kind of relevant? Talk to me, Keith.
Yeah, Lazard is a guy, I don't know. You need him to score, I think, to get there. There's a route for him to get there on volume, but I don't think there's a great chance of that happening. So it's Valdes-Scantling for me. He's the guy that I'm going to be overweight on, chasing those air yards. I think he's leading the team in air yards over Devontae Adams. So you mentioned the ADOT. He's getting the big shots. They have not connected on one yet. Just hoping that people get sick of trying to attack it. But on Showdown, one play, he can be optimal. So he runs the routes that I'm looking for. As a home run hitter. He's been behind the defense like 3 or 4 times in the first 2 weeks, and Rodgers just hasn't put it on him. So he's still getting those same routes that we chase all the time, and has been successful winning the route, just hasn't connected with Rodgers. So I'm going to play for it to happen. I'm going to try to be probably double the field on Valdes-Scantling. He's the secondary Green Bay piece that I'm going to. And then the San Francisco side, like Sherfield, there's not enough upside there. And there's concern that Aiyuk kind of takes over his role and ends up seeing more volume. So I don't
Good
know.
point. Good
I
point.
don't mind. I wouldn't call you crazy if you love Sherfield in this spot. The price is super cheap. Ownership doesn't look out of control. Like if he's a guy that you wanted to take a stand on, I'm not going to call you crazy for that.
No, I don't. I think you make a good point. If Ayuk's going to play more, then he probably negatively correlates with Sherfield. I know you can throw a lot of correlations out the window in Showdown. But man, what's a Niners Showdown slate without Kendrick Bourne? That was my go-to, and now he scored
always
today,
caught
by
that
the
touchdown,
way.
right?
He was like,
score
he was like a Willie Snead of like 3 years ago, just 1,800 receiver. You just slamming the captain spot. But anyway, tight ends, real quick, Kittle, Tonyan, and like, I guess you could punt one of these other guys if you're nuts, but Kittle and Tonyan, break them down for me, and then we'll build a lineup here.
Yeah, Kittle, I have a lot of interest in. They could run some screens to him too, and he is a guy that has immense after the play or after the catch ability. We've seen monstrous performances from him. One of the few tight ends in the league. I think you could play at the captain and not have any hesitation about it. It's a guy we've seen a 200-yard ceiling out of, multiple touchdown ceiling out of. So haven't seen it from him yet this year, but as big of upside as there is at the tight end position in the NFL. So love Kittle. Tonyan is a guy that we've seen catch multiple touchdowns too. I mean, I wouldn't call you crazy if you wanted to captain him. So I have more interest in Kittle, I think, just because I have more Adams and like Kittle on the other side of that.
Yeah.
But Tonyan is a guy I want some exposure to for sure. Not sure if I'm going to be able to get on over the field on him, but I do like him.
His touchdown equity or whatever you want to call it from last year, just looking at this game log, he scored every other game. He had that stretch where he scored in 4 straight games. He had that 1-3 touchdown game against the Falcons, which was a showdown slate, I believe, by the way. So yeah, I get it. He's touchdown dependent, but it seems like he catches one legitimately every other game.
Yep.
Anyway, let's build the lineup here. Let's for DK, let's say we're playing like a 3 max, 1,000 entries or something like that, right? So let's build according to the contest size here. Let's do one with and without Sermon. So let's do one without Sermon at captain. Is that cool with you? We were speaking pretty highly of Devontae Adams being the optimal wide receiver 1. Do you want to roll with that at captain?
I think they're the two guys that I would lean to first in a 3 max would be Deebo Samuel or Devontae Adams. Slight lean to Adams as far as who I think is going to score the most points. I like the leverage with Samuel, but I'm totally fine going Adams if you want to go there.
No, let's go Samuel, because I think that's more of a unique build for sure, especially if you follow the 2-4 leverage that we discussed about, or the Showdown slate article discussed about, because it's easier to jam in 4 Niners pieces outside of the captain than it probably will be for Green Bay players that actually contribute. So which also means you're probably playing Garoppolo typically. So that's a little uncomfortable as well, but lower ownership. I mean, Deebo captain and Jimmy flex is a significantly less ownership than Adams and Rodgers at flex will be.
Definitely agree with you on that it will be significantly less owned. I think, and I'm not saying we have to do it on this lineup, but I think fading Garoppolo, even in a Samuel captain, is viable on this slate because of the presence of Trey Lance. There's a scenario where Trey Lance comes in when they're in the red zone and throws the touchdown to Deebo, and you do not need Garoppolo on this Deebo captain lineup. Crazy thought, but
no, it's not so crazy. Viable. I mean, we've seen some Justin Fields stuff before this week, and the Trey Lance could be the Taysom Hill package guy. Who knows? You're absolutely right. So we don't have to put Garoppolo in here. So give me the other Niner then, or we're playing maybe at worst we're going to make a 3-3. I'm assuming here. So give me the other Niner, or who's next on your list on the pair with you. You want to throw Trey Lance in there and
no,
be?
I don't want to play Trey Lance. I was just saying a path to Garoppolo not getting there is Lance, but Lance could throw the touchdown and end up with less than 10 points. So I still don't have any interest in playing Lance, but I have less interest in Garoppolo because of the presence of Lance.
That's fair.
I think we're we have one of the, not the highest owned captain. So I think we're fine just jamming Sermon here. I don't see anyone else that like he has to get work in this game. I feel pretty confident he's going to be out there for at least 50-60% of the running back touches. And at that price, shouldn't have trouble paying it off.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair. If you play those two the way it is, you have about 8,200 per position left. So if you're playing Niners with a lead likely here with a Debo captain, I think you play depends how you feel about Valdez-Scantling, but Devontae Adams is probably the raw point guy here, right? And highest upside. So I kind of want to stick him at a flex spot here.
I like that. Yep.
Okay.
I think that's a great next step here to this lineup.
Yeah, nothing against Aaron Jones, but I mean, obviously you want the Niners, Debo to be doing some work and Sermon to be kind of pacing the rest of the game here with a little bit of a lead. So I feel like Green Bay will be playing some catch up here. Are you playing Aaron Rodgers in this build? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, so I think we have a decision here between Garoppolo and Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we're going to have. We could probably make both of them fit, I guess, if we wanted to. But just that uncertainty with Trey Lance being there, I am comfortable leaving Garoppolo out of this lineup. I think Rodgers is the next place that we should go here.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm with you. So things in the way on my screen.
We cannot fit Garoppolo in that.
No, so that gives you 48.50 left per position. We can legally throw one more guy in here and then let you use your imagination to fill the last spot. So let's see here. So now we're looking for some value. And where would you go? What would be the next step here?
We talked about Valdez-Scantling. There's a chance he could get you 0, or he might catch 2 balls on 8 targets. Like, that's just the player that he is. But for 3 max, I don't know if you need to go here. If it was a larger field tournament, I think Valdez-Scantling would definitely be the guy here.
Well, you put him in, it still gives you 5,100. You could, there's nothing wrong with playing like a Robbie Gould on this slate and leave a little money. Lazard could, I don't know, 30 yards and a touchdown in the right kind of game script. So, like, even if you do play Valdez-Scantling, I think there are some other outs, you can use that makes sense.
Yeah, I like your kicker call for a more optimal build. Like in a 3 max, I think a kicker makes sense here for sure.
Okay, cool. Let's bring up the YouTube chat here and get to some questions. I'm sure we got some good ones because this is a hell of a slate we have, and thanks for sticking with us here on this Sunday night. Let's see. Let's scroll all the way up. All right. Is it a Kyle Juszczyk game? Is the first comment I see. Man, oh man, we're coming in hot. I don't know. How do you predict Kyle Juszczyk games, Keith? Can you?
I cannot. If there's somebody out there that can, do I think he's in play on this slate? Absolutely. He's probably the most talented fullback that there is in the league. He can catch some passes. They'll hand it to him on the goal line. He's absolutely in play.
So we had a FanDuel best strategy for large field GPP question and favorite contrarian MVP. Personally, I talked about using Trey Sermon at MVP and leaving some money on the table because he's projected probably not in the top 5 on FanDuel in terms of raw points, but I think there's an outcome where in the right game, maybe he scores twice and is the raw point scorer. We've definitely seen a lot, many weirder things happen. So I kind of like, large field GPP is screaming to play Trey Sermon at MVP, I think, to get different.
Yeah, I like that. I definitely see paths where the 49ers run it a ton and Sermon gets there. He gets, 15 carries and ends up in the end zone twice. Definitely a route to that. And he can absolutely be the top scorer on the slate.
All right, Keith. Derek has a question. DK GPP rank Valdez-Scantling, Cobb, and Lazard in any order that you wish. Who are the best plays there? In what order?
I think it's Valdez-Scantling ahead by a fairly decent margin for me. Cobb is probably
Cobb barely played last week, right? 15 snaps, I think.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't have much interest in either Lazard or Cobb. I think it's Lazard slightly ahead just because he is the more talented guy, I think. So if he finds a route to a few more if he finds a path to a few more routes, I could see him getting there. I don't know what upside Randall Cobb has. He's going to catch he's going to run 6 to 10 yard routes and doesn't have a ton of after the catch ability. I like Lazard better than Cobb. So give me MVS, Lazard, Cobb.
I like that order too. I agree with you. How do you guys feel about a Sermon Sherfield build is the next question here. Depends what you feel about Aiyuk, like we talked about. If you think he's going to progressively play a little more, I think Keith and I agreed that'll take some snaps away from Sherfield. Sure, could he look into a touchdown? Yeah, and he's super cheap. I'm playing Sermon everywhere tonight. Sherfield, I don't have a ton of. Just being honest here. Carry on. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But no, I was just going to say I'm the exact same, but I wouldn't be worried about negative correlation as part of that conversation of whether you can do it or not. They're both very cheap. If you think Sherfield's going to be on the field, that's a totally fine construction.
Okay. All right. A lot of Kerryon Johnson buzz here. Eric wants to play Kerryon Johnson in the chat, I think. So I don't there's a chance he doesn't play at all. There's a chance he has 10 to 12 carries. I don't know. Maybe he's somewhere in the middle. Like he was just elevated off the practice squad. And I wish I knew more. I think he's a totally viable punt in large field stuff. Don't play him in cash games and probably not playing him in small field stuff, in my opinion.
I like the line of thinking from Eric there. I'm on board with that. I think I don't think there's any circumstance where Sermon gets 80+% of the work here. There's going to be a second running back. It's just what Shanahan does. Like they're almost always running back by committee.
And could it be? I mean, Trenton Cannon didn't get a lot of burn previously, but is it going to be Jaquez Patrick, who had a pretty nice little preseason with the Bengals? That's the burning question there. Less people are going to own Patrick because he's 2K. So a little harder to fit in some builds where you're punting. So to me, I'd rather set a build rule or play Patrick or Kerryon Johnson and not play them both together.
I agree with that. I think one of them gets there for sure. I couldn't tell you which one it's going to be. So I love grouping them out, saying only one possible in my lineups. I love putting them in a group and saying next one.
Couple of minutes before lock, make sure you're hitting those submit buttons soon if you're tinkering. Man, a lot of people like Kyle Juszczyk tonight, and I get it. Shanahan's a madman; he could plunge it in and
But
score.
Juszczyk in that group with the cheap running backs too, and limit one of the three.
Yeah, I mean, you totally could. All right, Eric's playing Juszczyk over Kerryon. Good to know. FanDuel GPP, can I go Kittle over Debo and leave 2K on the table? Absolutely, you can. Great way to get different. I'm on board with that.
Yep, totally fine leaving salary in Showdown for sure.
Okay, Lazard or MVS, last spot on DK. I think we both like MVS more than Lazard.
Yep.
Who
way more upside for me.
Who are your locks tonight? I mean, we both really like Trey Sermon. Outside of Sermon, I don't think anybody's a lock in lineup construction, in my opinion. And maybe Trey Sermon's not, but he is my favorite play tonight.
Yeah, I agree. I'm off Aaron Jones, so I weigh more Devontae, and then I like Debo and Kittle just as much on San Francisco. So I mean, those are the big three guys that I'm looking at: Adam, Samuel, and Kittle.
Okay, one more. Under what circumstance would you play Packers defense tonight? What kind of build?
Aaron Jones captain build is absolutely the one.
I'm with you. Pair Packers D with Aaron Jones, Alex. Jimmy G captain. Eric, it's not our cup of tea to go quarterback at captain typically. Lock in those lineups, folks. 8-19. Thanks for sticking with us as usual here. Lots of great questions, a lot of good chatter. Give us a like and a subscribe. And 8:20, and it looks like we are ready for some Sunday night football. It's going to be really interesting to see how Shanahan handles the workload. And I think Sermon, like we said, we'll see 2/3 of it probably. And I'm sure there'll be some overreactions tomorrow about whatever happens in about 10 minutes.
Does Brandon Aiyuk see the field? That's what I'm most curious to see.
Brandon Aiyuk see the field. Well, I sure as hell hope so. I'm overweight on Brandon Aiyuk, but we'll see what happens. But thanks everyone for joining us. Appreciate the questions. And Devin, I'll always bring you out at the end, wrapping up another long, successful Sunday at RotoGrinders. A lot of great content. So Dev, give us Devin's pick tonight. What's your prediction for the game?
Oh geez, hang on.
Can't wait to hear that.
Let me hang on. My lineups are swapping from previous to live here.
Ooh.
Who is my captain is Debo Samuel. Let's go for that. How about that?
I love it.
All right. Yeah. I like the leverage. Good stuff. All right. So I guess that's it until next Sunday night here. Keith, anything else before we get out of here?
No, I finally put together a decent main slate, so happy to get the first big W out of the way on the main slate. Looking forward to a lot more football this year. So,
what was the hit in that GPP, if you don't mind us asking? Since you're
it
not on
was-
Twitter, we'll victory lap here. For it.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't anything huge. It was 10K up top, so I finished third for 3K.
Only.
Hey,
Yeah,
profit's profit, my friend. Good stuff.
W
Good,
is a W.
That's right. Yeah.
good bills. Good stuff, Keith. Congrats. Nice little momentum heading into Showdown and the rest of the week. So let's get out of here. I know Devin probably wants to get some sleep, as do the rest of us. So for producer Devin and my co-host here, Keith, I'm Justin. Good luck, everybody. See you next week.